Who were we? Before the ships started to sail and the transatlantic trading began, before they hoisted their sails with our husbands and children, packed like livestock alongside our wives and our newborn babies clad with the blankets of contempt, before 10.5 million lives were lost at sea, who were we? Before the color of our skin and the texture of our hair were used as determinants as to whether or not we were actually a part of humanity. Before those things became a common trademark of a then very common commodity. Who were we? Before the oppressors decided that the very thing that makes us beautiful makes us less than human, that the shape of our bodies was an invitation to put us on display, to be poked, prodded, and dichotomized, to be explored as subjects of science, to be analyzed. If you don't know what I'm talking about, read about the degradation of an 18th century woman from the South African Khoikhoi tribe who, because of their large buttocks, were considered less than human. Her name? Sarah Baartman, who the scientists said, and I quote, had the sexual primitivism and intellectual equality of an orangutan. She was kept in a cage and led around like a wild animal and exhibited as a freak show. But eventually the French and Englishmen wanted to know. Yes, they became curious about what was underneath the costume of the Hottentot Venus. So her owner went from having her performing tricks to turning some, prostituting her until her life and body were done. But even in death, she still had no rest, because they dissected her, removing her genitals and her brain, still robbing her of her pride and dignity again and again. They placed them in jars and put them on display for all to see. She was dead, and even then, they wouldn't let her be. The freak show continued in France's Musée de l'Homme, from her death in 1815 until 2002, when Nelson Mandela declared that this exhibition is done. He demanded her remains and gave her a proper burial at a non-disclosed place, bringing an end to almost 200 years of her personal disgrace. Who were we? Before we stood on the auction blocks, decked with anklets, bracelets, and necklaces not made of silver or gold, standing there in shame until someone slammed a gavel and shouted, "Sold!" Before they took our drums, chants, and dance, which later became the advent of spirituals, blues, and jazz, before our names were changed and our individuality restructured to suit the buyers for their own predilection, before we became fugitives, and worldwide the trees with blood for blossoms bore that strange black fruit with the nappy stem. Who were we? Before we became visible minorities with mouths that had no voice and minds that were not privileged to receive formal learning, when our freedom was brought to a standstill, when human rights was not even a birthright and we were slaughtered at will. Before we became so stigmatized and subjugated by racial discrimination, before all life had to offer was abuse and oppression. Now, if you think that is all in the past, allow me to introduce you to our present, because we've been freed from chains only to be put in cuffs, fighting against a system that is blatantly unjust. If you think what happened to George Floyd was just a one-time thing, then you really don't know the world my people live in. Our response with protests were not a form of an attack. It was merely the straw that broke the camel's back. The looters and the lawbreakers, they were not from our side. They were Trojan decoys just trying to turn the tide. If you think we should just get over it, I dare you tell that to the Jews about the Holocaust. Look what we have been through, how much we have suffered, how much we have lost. See, what we're fighting for is not only justice, restitution, and equality, we want to reclaim our freedom and our identity. Who were we? Contrary to the lies propagated by ill-bred so-called historians whose idea of history is really just a one-sided story, having very little to do with truth and or reality. We were kings and queens, mathematicians and scientists, pharaohs, nobles and aristocrats, royals and rulers over the vast continent of Africa. We sat on thrones in Europe and even in the Middle East. We were innovators and inventors, to say the least. This is our history, that we were architects and engineers before there was a thing called slavery, the masterminds behind the pyramids which until today remain a mystery. We are Africa, the cradle of civilization and humanity. We taught the Germans and other Europeans who came to us to learn math, physics, and science. Our sons and husbands were hunters, not the hunted. And our women, unashamed of their body's composition or complexion, did not starve themselves or bleach their skin. Who were we? Slavery is a part of our history, but it is neither the beginning nor the end. To understand who we are today, we must know who we were then. Because enlightenment leads to entitlement, and in the absence of knowledge there is no power. And that is why parts of our history have been erased and our identities misplaced. No, we will not forget what we have been put through. To our history and our identity we will remain true. For we are still geniuses and inventors, not only great musicians, dancers, and singers. We are the drums that continue to beat throughout the centuries. We are the dance, the chants, and the rhythm that uplift the soul. We are the flowers that strive to flourish, where the trees that bore the strange black fruits used to grow.